And welcome back, everybody. This is Rusty here with the Rugby Review, and this week we're going to be doing somewhat of a playoff rewind. So we're going to be going through the last two playoff rounds of the top 14. In addition, we're going to be going through the grand final rounds of the URC plus the Prem. So with that said, let's start with the last couple rounds of the top 14, and then we will move into the URC plus the Prem. So here we have the semifinal bracket for the top 14, and semifinal 1 was played between Toulouse and Racing 92, in which Toulouse won in a very dominant fashion. Toulouse ended up winning this game by a score of 71-17. Not much to say about this game. It was very one-sided, very lopsided. Stade Toulouse came out ready to play, and unfortunately for Racing, they just did not take the week to get ready appropriately and ended up on the wrong side of a beatdown. So again, Toulouse was able to win in dominant fashion, and Toulouse secured the first spot in the grand final of the top 14. And our second semifinal was a much better game, much closer game, much more competitive game between Montpellier and Stade Francais, in which Montpellier ended up winning the game by a score of 25-15. And the biggest difference maker in this particular game was Montpellier building the scoreboard and taking advantage of the ill discipline that Stade Francais was showcasing during this whole game. So again, Montpellier secured the win, and they were able to secure the second spot in the top 14 grand final. So with that being said, let's quickly go through the stat line for both games, and then we'll go into the grand final round for the top 14. So here we have the first semifinal between Toulouse and Racing 92. Scoreline showcases Toulouse being just a much more dominant team, and then the rest of the stat card also enforces that idea. Many more tries scored, dominant in possession territory. Toulouse didn't have to play that much defense in comparison to Racing. Toulouse making a bunch of post-contact meters in comparison to Racing as well. Just overall, much better performance from Toulouse during this game than Racing. Definitely a game that the players in Racing will not necessarily try to forget, but definitely a motivating poster board type game where if I'm a Racing coach or a Racing player, this is a result that I never want to have happen again, and I would be using this particular game as a lot of motivation going into the off-season and preseason to work on whatever weaknesses we have, so that way this type of performance never happens again. But if you're a Toulouse fan, this was a great performance for you. Gives you a lot of confidence going into the finals round. So really good, really strong win for Toulouse, and not the result that you want if you're Racing 92, but hopefully something that gives them a lot of motivation to improve going into the off-season and then preseason. Looking to our second semifinal game, again, it was between Montpellier and Stade Francais. A much better game here, much closer game. But I will say, again, the biggest difference maker in this game was Montpellier putting Stade Francais under defensive pressure, and then having Stade Francais commit many more penalties than Montpellier did, and with all of those penalties that Stade conceded, it gave Montpellier a lot of penalty kick opportunities, and the fly half for Montpellier did a great job this week converting. I don't know if it was all of them, but like pretty much all of them to help build the score, build the lead, and secure the second spot in the grand final. So if we look at penalties conceded, this is pretty much the main area that would stick out to me, again, just based off the way the game was played. 13 penalties for Stade, 4 penalties for Montpellier. A huge difference between the two teams right there, and just emphasizes the point of Montpellier taking advantage of the ill discipline on Stade and being able to build and pad their scoreline off the ill discipline of Stade. So it's kind of an old school way of playing for Montpellier, but you can't knock it. It secured them the second spot in the grand final against Toulouse. And so with that being said, here is the result of the grand final of the top 14. It was a pretty competitive game. I was kind of nervous after the first half, but Toulouse was able to secure the victory over Montpellier by a score of 28-20, and this was Toulouse able to secure their 4th straight top 14 championship. Absolutely insane to see Toulouse get 4 championships in a row, just really emphasizing the point of how strong of a generation this Toulouse team is behind Antoine Dupont. So again, this ended up being a very close game, very competitive game, but I was pretty nervous after the first half because of how well Toulouse played in the first half, and Montpellier did not look like they were ready for this game hardly at all. But fortunately, Montpellier was to regroup a bit at halftime, and they were able to have a couple of quick scores, and they were able to get back into the game. But the biggest difference maker in this particular game was a lot of little handling errors and penalties on the part of Montpellier, which then kind of killed all their offensive flow and turned the ball back over to Toulouse. Plus, Toulouse put in a huge defensive shift, especially in that second half, and Toulouse did a great job turning the ball over at the breakdown as well, kind of killing and stopping the offensive flow for Montpellier. So let's look at the stat card of this game fairly quickly. Kind of looking through this really quickly. It just looks like Montpellier was the much more dominant team in this game, despite the first half that Toulouse had. Because again, Toulouse went into half with a lead. Toulouse was the much stronger team in the first half, and it looked like Montpellier was on the ropes at half. But if you look at the overall stat line here, it really doesn't look like Toulouse had that dominant of a first half in comparison to what Montpellier was able to do in the second. Anyway, the biggest thing that I noticed, the biggest difference in stats that stuck out to me while looking over this stuff was the number of turnovers lost. Again, 22 turnovers lost for Montpellier to 11 for Toulouse. Now, Toulouse having 11 turnovers lost during the course of this game is it's a big number, but in comparison to 22, Toulouse looks like they did a great job. So this is when I was saying the handling errors of Montpellier kind of shot them in the foot a bit. This is, exactly what I mean. 20 plus turnovers lost, 20 plus handling errors during the course of this game. The fact that Montpellier was able to fight back and only lose by an 8-point margin by the end of this game kind of speaks volumes to how well Montpellier was playing outside of the handling errors. But Toulouse just did a great job on defense as well. 11 turnovers at the breakdown to just 4 for Montpellier. So Jack Willis and co. did just a great job defensively stopping the offensive flow for Montpellier, in addition to the handling errors for Montpellier themselves. So congrats to Toulouse for securing their 4th straight championship. Really great win for them. Really great for them to utilize their defense, especially in the second half, to protect that lead and the number of points scored in the first. And then Montpellier, they'll probably feel like they had one get away from them, especially with the number of handling errors they had. But, hopefully this will be good motivation for Montpellier going into the offseason plus the preseason. And, maybe Montpellier will be winning this championship next year. Time will tell. But this was a fun top 14 season to watch again. Dominant performance by Toulouse, kind of start to finish. You kind of thought that they would make another championship run. But, that's it for the top 14 this year. Again, Toulouse capped it off with their 4th straight Brennus Cup championship. And we shall see what the next season brings to us. So that's it for the top 14. And now we're going to move into the URC Grand Final. So this took place a couple weeks ago, and the URC Grand Final was between Leinster plus the Vodacom Bulls. And I was really hoping this was going to be a much closer game than it ended up being. For the second year in a row, Leinster was able to win the grand final match in dominant fashion. Leinster ended up winning this game against the Vodacom Bulls by a score of 36-7. And, there's not a whole... we'll end up looking at the stat sheet here in a second. But again, not a whole heck of a lot to talk about here, because Leinster was wound for sound and came out ready to play, and it looked like the Vodacom Bulls just got smacked in the mouth at the beginning of the game and really just were never able to recover and never able to get themselves back into the game at any point in time. So with all that being said, let's look at the stat sheet, and it's really just going to emphasize how strong of a game Leinster had, plus kind of the weak points of the Bulls during the course of this game. Very strong possession and territory advantage. Many more tries scored for Leinster as opposed to the Bulls. The Bulls are having to put in a huge shift defensively. In comparison to Leinster, the Bulls had to make 236 tackles to just 158 for Leinster. So a huge difference there. Leinster doing a great job exerting offensive pressure on the Bulls, especially with the possession advantage, making the Bulls put in a lot of work defensively. What was interesting is, despite the Bulls having to put in such a high effort defensively, they were able to get a lot of front football, and the Bulls were able to get a lot of clean breaks and a lot of meters gained during the course of this game. 492 meters gained for the Bulls, 421 for Leinster. Pretty comparable, despite the possession advantage for Leinster and the sheer number of tackles, sheer volume of tackles Bulls had to make during the course of this game. Now, as we move down the stat sheet here, the one big thing that I noticed, and it's similar to what happened to Montpellier in the top 14 final, is the Bulls had a large number of handling errors in comparison to Leinster. 16 turnovers lost for the Bulls to just 6 turnovers lost for Leinster. Massive difference, especially in a grand final, and especially when Leinster was playing really well and exerting a significant amount of offensive pressure on the Bulls. So, tip the hat to Leinster here for back-to-back championships and another super dominant championship performance by Leinster here. So, Leinster will be happy, or I would imagine they would be happy, having secured back-to-back championships in the URC. And the Bulls, man, they got to do a little bit of soul searching in this offseason here. And what I mean by that is I think the Bulls have gone to the URC Grand Final at least 4 times and have lost every single time. So, the Bulls, great rugby team, they're able to put together really good, really good postseason runs, but they haven't quite been able to peak that summit just yet and secure that championship game. So that's what I mean by the Bulls will have to do some soul searching in this offseason, because they need to figure out what is their potential mental block keeping them from peaking that mountain, getting to that summit, and securing that championship. So, again, great win for Leinster. They'll be happy with the back-to-back championships, and then we'll see how the Bulls do in this offseason, getting themselves prepared, hopefully for another deep playoff run, and maybe even securing that championship. And so that's the end of the URC season. The last thing that we are going to go over in this episode this week is the Premiership's grand final between Northampton and the Exeter Chiefs, in which Northampton secured the victory in this particular game by a score of 26-17 over the Exeter Chiefs. This was a really fun game to watch. It's very back and forth throughout the entire game. It just seemed that by the end of the game, Exeter had kind of lost a bit of steam, kind of ran out of gas, started to run on empty, especially in that last 5, maybe 10 minutes. So let's look at the stat line here real quick. Again, super close game between these two teams here, and you're going to see that quite a bit with the stat line here. Both teams, similar amount of tries scored, 3 tries for Exeter, 4 for Northampton. Possession plus territory is the closest we've seen out of any game in this particular episode. Number of tackles, very comparable between the two. And, Northampton should consider themselves pretty lucky. They had less tackles to make, but had more than twice the amount of tackles missed than Exeter did. So, the defensive discipline for Northampton, not the best this particular game, but it seems like it didn't bite them in the butt too bad. As per the usual, as you could imagine, Northampton with a significant number of post-contact meters, just kind of typical with their play style, high tempo, high offloads, all the fun stuff to watch. We see Northampton with 432 post-contact meters to 280 for Exeter, and really that's kind of like the biggest difference between the two teams here that I saw. And then the other thing that I noticed was the conversion rate of missed tackles into clean breaks. Now, the number of clean breaks was pretty comparable between the two. Exeter had 7, Northampton had 9. However, Northampton had 9 clean breaks on 15 missed tackles. That means almost well, it's more than 50%. I don't know what that number is off the top of my head from a percentage standpoint, but Northampton did a much, much better job converting missed tackles to clean breaks than Exeter did, despite Northampton having a significant more amount of missed tackles than Exeter did. It could it be that poor conversion rate of missed tackles to clean breaks is what kept Exeter back from winning? I don't know, but it's something that I noticed when kind of looking through this because a lot of other things are fairly comparable between the two, except again for the clean breaks to missed tackles conversion. But anyway, again, it was a really, really fun game to watch between the Saints and the Chiefs. Good on Northampton for being able to secure this championship. There hasn't been a back-to-back championship in the Prem for a very long time, from what I can remember. But nice to see Northampton get that championship. They were a very, very strong team. They were the number one seed in the Prem for the majority of the season. And so, good on Northampton for securing the championship. Tough loss for Exeter, but Exeter had a good season. They had a good playoff run. But I don't know what they'll look at in the off season, but I'm sure Rob Baxter will get this Exeter team playing extremely well again and being a threat for next year's Prem Championship. So that's it for all the European championships. So all European club seasons are done for the summer, and we are now coming into the international test period. We've already kind of had the beginnings of the international test period. There's been 2 Barbarians games that have been played. The Barbarians versus South Africa, which ended up being very one-sided. South Africa, I think, had like 81 points scored to 30 something for the Barbarians. You could just tell that the Barbarians were running out of steam and did not have the same physical fitness as the Springboks did. And then the second Barbarians test game was the Barbarians versus Wales, in which that game was super close, probably much closer than the Welsh national team ever wanted it to be. It was like 33 Wales, 31 Barbarians. Super close game. Super fun to watch. It was really exciting to see. Would the Barbarians come back and win the game? Unfortunately, was not meant to be. But we have had the start to the international test series, or the international summer series, and there's plenty more to come, especially the Rugby Championship for the Southern Hemisphere teams. So that's it for this week. If you made it this far in the video, thanks a bunch for watching. I greatly appreciate it. If you could do me a favor and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, do all the things for the algorithm, it would be greatly appreciated. Again, that's it for this week, and I will see you next time, and the next time we're here, it's going to be all international games. So I hope everybody enjoys their rugby, and I will see you next time.